in. I hope you all are excited about the panel as much as I am. So guys, just drop in your LinkedIn IDs who all have joined, all the participants, so that we can connect with each other and grow our network. So you can do that. Guys can, you know, like tell your friends and to join that as well. Speakers will be joining in shortly, just a few more minutes, and we'll be starting off with the session. I would like to welcome Vidyut Vedikar ma'am to the panel. Warm welcome. And
Hi.
hi
Hi.
ma'am.
Hi.
And I would also like to welcome Pradeep Bhupati, Pradeep sir to the panel as well. Pradeep sir, are you there?
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Everyone.
So we'll be starting off soon in a few minutes.
Okay.
Welcome to the panel, Manshu sir.
Hello, hi.
Yeah, hi sir. So as I can see, all the panelists are here, so we're good to go. So it is said, you read a book from beginning to the end and you run a business the opposite way. You start with the end and then you do everything you must to reach it. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to everyone present here. We are gathered here today to witness some experts from the field of law to guide us through the nitty-gritties of legality behind building up a startup with a strong legal base. A startup without legal support is like a cruise without a lifeboat. But why do startups need lawyers? A startup lawyer helps your business foresee legal issues and also advises on how to successfully avoid them. Thus, I would like to extend a hearty welcome to the speakers of our panel discussion, Advocacy. Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology was established in 1993 through the rigorous efforts of our beloved founder, Dr. Achyut Nanda Samanta. Within a decade and a half, the university has acquired a reputation as a top notch educational organization, nurturing more than 30,000 students and faculty members. The Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences provides education, overall care, and nurtures more than 30,000 tribal students from nursery to postgraduate and brings forward those who were left behind. The KIIT Entrepreneurship Cell was founded in 2013 and is currently supporting 20 plus startups in collaboration with numerous others. The KIIT Entrepreneurship Cell is incomplete without KIIT's Technology Business Incubator, also known as the KIIT TBI. The KIIT TBI, a recipient of the National Award for TBI in 2017, is supported by several government bodies to boost the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Odisha. The KIIT Startup Conclave stands for bringing people together from KIIT University and all around India who are interested in starting their own venture and are geared up for showcasing their revolutionary ideas to strengthen the world. This will aid in fostering an entrepreneurship culture among participants as well as their professional development. So let's have a glimpse of today's event through a short 2-minute video. So that video must have shown you guys what you are in for today. So now, moving ahead, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed set of panelists. We have Mr. Himanshu Gupta, founder and CEO Lawyer, Ms. Radhika Singh, managing partner Alethea Legal, Mr. Pradeep Bhupati Raju, head of patent department Alticid Global, and Ms. Vidyut Bedekar, practice head TLA. And now, as Gen Z says it, we are looking forward to a wholesome session ahead. Now that we have introduced to you our experts, we won't be taking any more of your time. So now I would like to call upon Mr. Sudipta De, Associate Dean PNP of KIIT School of Law, to take over from the session from here. Over to you, Sudipta sir.
Thank you so much, Bitan, and a very warm good afternoon to all our esteemed panelists. So I'm Professor Sudipta De Sarkar of the School of Law, KIIT University, and also heading the IP department at the School of Law. So it's been a real pleasure to be introduced to you at this panel. And for all our panelists and all our members over here, I'll just take this opportunity of individually welcoming and briefly introducing each of our speakers, and then we can continue with this session. So, for Mr. Himanshu Gupta, he has been a very result-oriented and decisive leader and a persuasive communicator with a wide and a huge experience in this field. And He has seamlessly combined his successful corporate domain and technology expertise to the exciting growth story of Wired. His strengths lies in the field of products and from ideation to execution, and has over 2 decades of diverse experience in managing technology, technical and commercial functions. So we take this opportunity to welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to with Duke Whitaker, who's the practice head of Tree of Life Associates. She's the co-founder of TLA, a boutique law firm with depth of understanding and domain expertise in technology and outsourcing, intellectual property, privacy law, labor and employment matters, and startup legal offerings. Her focus domains are corporate and commercial laws, mergers and acquisition, laws relating to inbound and outbound investment, intellectual property, in specific trademark and copyright law, and startup investments. So, madam, thank you for joining and welcome to this session.
Thank you, Professor Sudipta. It is a pleasure to be here.
So, introducing and welcoming Radhika Singh. She is the founder and managing partner of OmletArcade Legal, based out of Gurgaon. She's a lawyer with 10 years of experience and has pursued a master's LLM from King's College London, and has worked with India's leading law firms like Grantree and Sagar and Luthra and Luthra. Her expertise lies in advising clients on intellectual property rights, privacy and data protection, cyber law, conducting due diligence, drafting license agreements, software development agreements, terms and conditions, privacy policy, employment agreements, and other business contracts. We take this opportunity to also welcome Radhika Madam to this panel, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. And for our final panelist here, Mr. Pradeep Raju, he's the head of patent at Asset Global, one of India's renowned intellectual property law firms, and he has a wide and varied experience in the field of intellectual property and patents. And we at the IP department also have read a lot of articles and everything which Tathagato time to time has written and shared on social media and internet. So, sir, thank you very much, and really nice to have you on this platform. So briefly, moving ahead with the discussion, and before that, a brief introduction of the program. So we are presently ranked 10th as per the NIS Ministry of Education guidelines, and the school caters to more than 1,300 LLB students. So I have DLLB, DDLLB, BSc LLB students. We have LLM and PhD programs as well. So on top of that, we also have very specific divisions of intellectual property, business laws, taxation, international law, very strong and streamlined honest papers in this domain. As we are continuously evolving our curriculum, for which we also got the SILF Self Millard Award in 2018 for innovative curriculum. One of the things that are always is actually facing us right now is how do we promote entrepreneurship amongst the law students? How can law schools also participate with the legal fraternity in promoting this amongst the students, and also helping law firms and other enterprises from our own end? And of course, these are things and discussions which are always going on, and I think it's part of today's panel discussion. These are some of the areas where we can also throw some light on that. But that will be coming later. Having said this, I would like to invite our panelists to kindly share the thoughts and discussions on this. Bitan, is there anything more you would like me to add?
No, sir, that will be all.
Right. So, thank you all for joining, and also to our students who have joined, and for the organizers. So, you're open for discussion. So, Bitan, should I go ahead with some of my pointers towards the panelists, or is there a prior discussion, and then I can share with you?
Yes, you can go ahead with the questions.
Okay, that's fair. So, as part of today's discussion, so I will be having some queries with regards to our esteemed panelists here, and we look forward to their views and perspectives on that. So, starting with Radhika Madam. So, what do you think should be the eligibility criteria for a startup?
That's a very important question. And first of all, with your vision for the students of KIIT, where you're saying that you want to encourage entrepreneurship and
Yeah.
the startups. So that is brilliant, because in today's day and age, it's very simple. You don't have to come from a business background to start or enter a business. And I wish when I was in college, we did have that facility, so that bright mindset would have come in from the beginning. So when you're talking about startups and you're talking about the eligibility criteria for a startup, as per the Startup India, when you want to get registered with them, the criteria, if I talk about what they've brought in, is that the startup must either be a company, it should be incorporated either as a company, it should be registered, it could be a limited liability partnership, or it could also be a partnership firm. So that is the basic requirements, that you should be either of these three legal entities. Second is that the startup should not be older than 5 years. So within that 5 years, you need to register from the day when you started your business, as with Startup India. Third is that the annual turnover must not be more than 25 crores to be liable for startup registration. Fourth is that the business that the startup is involved in, it should be a new product or service, generally driven by technology or IP. So that is the fourth and the most important condition which should be there. And when they have all of this, then they should have obtained, certificate from DIPP that the business is innovative. Then they are ready to be registered as a startup with Startup India. So these are the basic 5 essential requirements that you need to comply with to be eligible for a startup.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. And we'll come back to you later with more questions to you. And also some of the points which you have mentioned about IP and startups. These are also things we'll come back to you later with you and the other panelists. So moving on, I would like to have a query for each panelist. What should you, what do you think should an investor look forward in a startup before investing from a legal point of view?
Right. So, what should an investor look for? I mean, this has been my experience, honestly, Professor Sudipta, is the often ignored aspect is looked at by investors, and many startups have actually, not received investment because of this particular point, which is compliance. Like what Radhika mentioned, the entity structure is either a private limited company or an LLP or a registered partnership. Now, our experience obviously shows that more often than not, it will be either an LLP or a private limited company. That will actually be a structure that most startups adopt, and it should be the case. Registered partnerships, in my view, are not really the best structure to actually adopt when you're registering or creating a startup. Yeah, eventually you'll have to convert it into an LLP or a private limited company, but the conversion typically means that carrying forward of losses and carrying forward of certain latent issues that potentially crop up in the initial days. So assuming that we're looking at a private limited company or an LLP for that matter, now from day one ensuring that the compliance aspects are taken care of, and this is where really our lawyers come in, right? Now we don't necessarily have to look at lawyers as expensive sharks that one needs to sort of keep handy only when things go wrong, or call them only for firefighting. And this is an ardent request to all the budding entrepreneurs, that look at lawyers as your friends from day one. Find a lawyer, even if your friend is a lawyer, and they are able to guide you in the right way, take their assistance, but ensure that compliances are done, company is properly incorporated, the initial share capital is infused properly. Another thing, I'll give you a practical example. Many founders will take money on personal loans into their accounts, and sort of transfer it from their personal accounts. Now, capitalizing a company the right way, the legal way, is absolutely critical, and going back means returning back that money, money which has already been utilized. So these kind of hurdles, I'm just giving a minor example of the issues that we have seen and the cleanup acts that we have had to do. But from day one, if the founders keep a very clear vision of compliance, I think that goes a long way in cementing, good investors. Investors are looking for clarity. Investors are looking for, they're not just looking, yeah, they're looking definitely for that bright idea out there, but they're also looking for, people who've done it the right way. Their IP is not all over the place. Their compliances are not all over the place. The employees have signed employment agreements to ensure that the IP vests with the company. If all of these things are done in the right manner with the right kind of guidance from good lawyers, and I'm repeating, good lawyers don't mean expensive lawyers, good lawyers. I think that is absolutely critical in my view.
So from what we get from your points, that compliance is paramount and very
Yes,
important to
very.
understand. And you would also include, I think, due diligence and other processes into this entire exercise before an investor comes into this.
Yeah, so investors will carry out their due diligences. That's a part of course, right? But during due diligence, when the investors' lawyers find that there are multiple issues cropping up, that's where the entire investment process gets either curtailed entirely or gets prolonged. Now, the minute it gets prolonged, Professor, what happens is that you are cutting yourself off from other potential investors also, right? You are focusing all your attention on cleaning up your act at the last minute, which could have been done right from day one. So therefore, if you really want to prime yourself for investment and investment from the right kind of people, I'm not talking about just friends and family. Friends and family will not do this, right? We're talking about investment coming from either angels or VC or PE firms, and which is at a slightly probably after the proof of concept has been done. At that point, once due diligence starts, it is best if the company has actually kept the compliance aspects in mind and ensure that all the registrations and documents are in place so that the due diligence progresses faster, smoother, and just the investment then comes to fruition faster.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Moving on to Mr. Pradeep Tathagato. So, sir, I would like to have a question. So, we are now talking about the investor's point of view that is setting up. I also want to know what is the government's approach to this entire scenario for startups? How do things go?
Government's approach towards startups. Okay. So I think the government has been lately in the recent years, I think have been really active with respect to startups, especially coming from the IPR background which I'm from. So I think in my space, I see there are a lot of incentives for startups these days. The government, after the initiation of the Startup India scheme, which they have started some time back, the fees of the patent filings or trademark filings, all the IP filings have come down drastically for startups, at least about 80% when it comes to patents. Okay, and recently I remember even for educational institutions,
Yeah. They have
BGMI
released it.
came
Right.
stream. So that's a very good initiative. It's very encouraging for the
It
startups
is.
and also cost effective because they used to be a perception among the entrepreneurs that start patents are expensive prior to this, but now patents are not really that expensive, and there's an ecosystem around which has been created by the governments also, like extending some facilitated those who would do a free consultation. Okay, so in that perspective, the startup industry has been very encouraging for the startups. That's one point, and probably the other thing is like even in the process. The process has been usually it takes about, let's say, about 3 to 5 years on average. So even there, they have given the startups an expedited route where now the applications, whatever they file, they can have a decision probably within a span of 12 to 18 months. You see, so these are the initiatives I think which the government has been doing with respect to patents. and other IP per se. Apart from that, they have been encouraging the IPR promotion cells within the organizations and also within the group of companies in that space. I think the government has been quite proactive in the recent years, especially with respect to IPR protection and encouraging startups in this arena, is what I feel.
Sure, because I also, as part of my research, I'm focused on IP innovation in academic institutions
Yes.
and taking it out to the society, technology transfer. So this part which you have mentioned is very, very relevant. This 80% reduction of cost. So we are waiting and we hope that this would have a very significant impact. Startups on one side and definitely for education institutions like KIIT and all of these universities. Sure. Thank you so much for this input. And so moving on to Mr. Himanshu Gupta. So a question which I would like to pose is on a bit of a cautious note, and that is, what mistakes or legal mistakes that we should avoid for a startup during its initial setting up phase?
Hi. Thank you so much, Sudhika, for this opportunity. And first of all, I would like to wish everyone a happy Children's Day, irrespective of our ages.
Happy Children's Day.
Let's all have the child inside us up and running always. And startups are always considered to be a child or children, the way they are being treated and the way they are being supported by the government. A valid question, though. On the negative note, the the mistakes that startups, do in the initial stages, part of it has been answered by Vidyut ma'am as well. Uh, the number that I have, though it's not verified, but almost 80% startups fail in the initial stages while they are still being incubated by themselves or whichever way. And there have been large reasons accounted for it. It can be the product that they're working on has no market. They have not identified various risks and they don't interact with potential customers. There are many reasons attached to it. But from legal perspective, of course, the lack of legal hygiene in the initial stages, which the startups generally tend to skip, is one of the primary reasons they fail as they are slated for growth. Many of the elements that Vidyut Dedikar has told about from investors' perspective are rightful as well. I would like to share an example where one of the startup in which I myself was investing, it took about 6 to 8 months for them to freeze the funding. Why? Because after they had rolled out their funding, somebody came up and said that they had invested, a friend and family only, had invested some money in the company, and as per their current valuation, they held about, it accounted for 50% of the stake in the company, which is ridiculous. So the only thing that the founder was missing was he did not have a proper agreement with that friend and family investor or angel investor per se, and it was almost at the state of closure. But thankfully, lawyered along with a couple of more lawyers, helped them bail out from that particular situation. But not every startup is lucky from that perspective. Uh, then many of the startups, they don't do a risk assessment in the early stages. What do I mean by risk assessment is checking the legalities in the area they are working on, whether it is legally permitted, whether if they tend to grow in the later stages, will they catch enough eyeballs in the market whereby their reputation can be jeopardized. They don't do risk assessment in the initial phases purely because they don't feel that there is any risk attached to it. uh, and of course lack of basic agreements to begin with, like founders agreement, which is more important than a marriage. I mean, founders are tied together, and their bond their bond has to be stronger than even their own marriage. So because it's something that they have been building upon for their life, so they miss upon these agreements in the initial stages, and that's largely contributes to the failure of these startups either in terms of growing or in terms of closing down. Yeah, so that's pretty much in terms of the mistakes that the startup generally commit in the initial stages.
Thank you for your input. So, from what I've noted down, one of the most important areas should also be risk assessment, in addition to what Vidit Madam has already pointed out, that is compliance and focus on compliance. Risk assessment and also a bit forward looking. And the data which you have shared, 80% would have failed in the initial stages. I think would you be categorizing this as a very general thing, or anything specific with regard to the legal field, or this is a very generic?
So yeah, 80% data is very generic because the focus on startups has been since 2014-15, ever since the new regime has come in and they have started pushing hard on entrepreneurship rather than seeking jobs. So I feel that still the startups are in the budding stages as compared to the Western countries and more developed nations, where the number of startups is huge. And also in terms of accelerators and incubators supporting the startups, their number is also in quite a plenty. So 80% startups fail. The entire reasons cannot be attributed to lack of legal hygiene, but yes, lack of legal hygiene contributes to large percentage out of the
Right.
startups that fail. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So we're moving ahead to our previous panelist and coming back to Radhika Madam. So this is a question for you. So what are the basic legal issues that you think that all startup founders should be aware of? It's kind of a continuation question because the earlier one was a bit negative note, that what should we avoid? This one is
Um,
what should we be aware of?
I would love to continue on that. Taking on from what Ms. Vidyut and Himanshu shared, the most important decision that startup founders need to take is like what Vidyut mentioned is the structure that they're going for, right? What we've noticed is investors mainly prefer a private limited company or an LLP because they own the IP and it's a better structure to invest in. One is that. Second, like what Himanshu said is most important agreement when they're starting off is the agreement between the founders. It needs to clearly mention the roles and responsibility of founders, the equity ownership, and the lock-in period if they have any. What will be the exit options that are there? Who will own the IP? And also something as important as if they want to remove some founder for misconduct, that clause should also be there. So there are your founders agreement needs to be very strong. Then another thing comes in is I generally work with startups when they're gearing up for investment. So there, what we do is we do a legal due diligence at a preliminary level where we basically advise them on looking at what are your IP assets in your business. Identify those. Do you have a technology that can be patented? Do you have a software that can be copyrighted? Have you registered your brands, which is the simplest thing which a lot of founders forget. And like what Vidyut is saying, it's seen as an expense. But what I generally tell people is do not see it as an expense. It's an investment in an asset which will grow over time. It's like investing in any other property. And what is important there is for the founders to understand, or people like the company to understand that what are their IP assets and how do they secure them. That is the second things that legal issues they need to be aware of. And very important is when we're working with some startups which are technology heavy, they have outsourced the development of the software or the technology to a third party. And when we ask them, have you signed a software development agreement? They're like, no, it's a friend. No, it's someone, who's been referred to me. We are at a very healthy, good relationship. Now, putting everything down in an agreement is very important from a future perspective, like what Vidyut and Himanshu and Pradeep also shared, that you need to be aware because tomorrow people don't know that when you're developing a software, if it does not clearly say who owns the IP, as per Copyright Act, the IP is owned by the developer, right? And unless the agreement is to the contrary. A lot of people don't know. We were helping a startup at a later stage, and the whole thing fell off because they didn't have a software development agreement, and the IP actually vested in the software developer. And that's when we told them, you have to get it done. And then they got the agreement done, and then the thing went off. So be very clear that the company owns the IP. It should not be in an individual partner. It should not be with an individual founder, because the investors will be investing in the company. Another thing would be clear ownership, like I said, that who owns the IP. Another important aspect is legal compliances, like Vidyut shared. If you're a technology company, you have a software which is a web app or a mobile app, ensure you're complying with the Information Technology Act. You're taking care of data privacy issues. You ensure you have a terms of use privacy policy. Then if you have employees, ensure you have proper employment agreements. We have had issues where the startups are going very well, but they do not have a proper termination clause in their agreement. They do not have a proper they don't have a clause on NDAs. Confidentiality is vague. So, having watertight agreements with your employees, with your consultants, then also important is, which you brought up, Professor, is patent heavy, startups. Pradeep would agree, is that they go in for technological developments where they tie up with institutes, they tie up with the government for research and development, having proper technology collaboration agreements, having proper technology transfer agreements. So these are some of the aspects from what I would say is some of the legal issues that startup founders must be aware of. And when they're going towards investment, ensuring that they get somebody who is aware of the terms that they're signing on. Unfortunately, we've seen people just going off, without going through that. So that's it.
Actually, one area where I fully understand also what you're looking at, and we see how ownership or deletion or non-continuation of a certain area created complications here. One of the worst case examples you give is the Rolls-Royce Volkswagen industry regarding the trademark. But again, also I can identify that in cases of university, we have certain skills of development. That is, maybe a student comes up with an idea, they share it with the professors, professors take it to the incubator. I think yes, and a lot of people are legal or law averse. They don't want law to enter or lawyers to enter at a very early stage. Maybe they view law as an expense or something. But yes, I think one common thread that is coming out from all three pattern to answer your question that law or lawyers have to be there to on a high level of process. And I think for those who are listening here, please keep it in mind. And also to get the role of lawyers is absolutely essential. But most of the safeguard relationships. So moving on to madam, excuse me. So a very specific question now. This is from the viewpoint of a startup founder. What kind of business entity would you strongly recommend startup founder?
My personal recommendation process would be a private limited company. Because, yes, LLPs have become very common for startup entrepreneurs to set themselves up as, but in terms of how the structure of a private limited company, is, and the history behind it, in terms of how the structure has been viewed, how common it has become, and how it takes care of the concerns, is something that I believe is best suited for startups in terms of their growth trajectory, right? So it allows massive scalability, And therefore, in my personal opinion, I think a private limited company, especially for when a bunch of people are coming together and are considering a startup, I think a private limited company works. I'll give you a few instances how. First and foremost, I'll tell you the disadvantages also. Obviously, it's not all peaches and roses here. But the main advantage is the distinction between the board of directors and the shareholders. Right, so you've got your investors come in as the shareholders, your founders are the major executive directors who are in charge of the day-to-day management of the company. Yes, they are major shareholders also, but in terms of this distinction of responsibilities, roles and responsibilities is really where a private limited company structure works. Secondly, what works is the kind of shareholding that a private limited company has in terms of the different types of instruments a private limited company can issue. For instance, you have your equity, which is your common shares. You have your preference shares, which are either convertible, non-convertible. You have your debentures, right, which is a type of a loan which is either converted to equity or then repaid. Now, under the Startup India scheme, you have something called as convertible notes. Convertible notes are again very similar to debentures, which can be converted into equity shares or preference shares at on the expiry of 10 years. So these are the different types of equity instruments that can be issued by a startup to its investors depending on whatever stage they are at. For example, convertible notes and convertible debentures can be at a pre-seed level, where a formal valuation is difficult, if not impossible. So just the way the structure of a private limited company works, all of these things have been cast in stone now. There's enough history to know if a certain issue arises, how to resolve it. Company law, to that extent, even though it has evolved up till the 2013 Act, and we therefore know, we have a clarity as to how if let's say a non-compliance has happened, how to resolve it. One doesn't have to go back to square one. There is a machinery in process. So these are some of the advantages I have seen of private limited companies. And although investors may not give it to you in writing, they do prefer a private limited company structure. Again, that has been my experience out of Bangalore. And the disadvantage, obviously, is the extent of compliances. So, compared to an LLP, the requirement of compliances for a private limited company are significantly higher. So, therefore, if let's say the entrepreneur is at a at a very very nascent stage where even the idea yet is not let's say the idea itself has not been fleshed out, the idea requires further ideation, then setting up an entity structure like a private limited company may be a little too early, because for whatever reason the fleshing of the idea doesn't go as contemplated. Then you're stuck with an incorporated company, which is very very difficult to shut down. So I think the decision to set up, yourself as a company or an LLP should come at a time when you see yourself only progressing ahead, and not at an ideation stage where you do not know if this idea is even going to take off. So so I would say that a private limited company, irrespective of the different kinds of structures that are coming about, still continues to remain a very predominantly important structure for a startup.
So if I can just add on a follow-up question on this. I mean, not specifically to you, but from a legal perspective, is our familiarity with the private limited structure as compared to LLP structure is also one of the reasons that we have a tendency to prefer this as an option? I mean, looking across the board for lawyers across the spectrum, suppose we are looking at startups even in a rural area or something. I mean, lawyers were expected to have some kind of an idea about the company law, the structure and everything. I think this familiarity can also play a part, that we are familiar with this company structures compared to LLP structures.
Uh, Potentially, but I think today not so much, Professor, because I think lawyers and company secretaries, around us are very well versed with how LLPs work, right? So I don't think that it is because of just the general understanding of the structure better. It's just that there's enough, maybe not empirical data available, but I think It's from an experiential point of view that I can say that my experience has been more often than not, a company structure has worked better than an LLP, or eventually the investor has expected the LLP to be converted to a private limited company, purely because if you see all the, as I explained to you, the debentures, the convertible notes, the convertible preference shares, all of these as equity instruments are only possible in a private limited company. So, and as you scale up, these are the only ways that you can raise money. So that is where really the structure works.
Sure. And what you would suggest is not at the ideation stage, but when we are already moving in the direction from ideation, we should be thinking about the private limited company.
Yes, because if at an
Correct.
ideation, yeah, I mean, at an ideation stage, for whatever reason, the idea doesn't really take off, or basis market research eventually, like what Himanshu said, when you do a market analysis, you realize that maybe there is no market for this, or there are already multiple players who are playing in this, and what you thought was your, innovation is already out there in the market. Now, if you are at that stage, then getting yourself incorporated prior to doing that research doesn't make any sense, because then what are you going to do with that company? Right? Once you set it up, as I said, shutting it down, it's not like opening a shop and shutting it down. Shutting a company takes a very long time, a very long process. And, to that extent, you need your advisors to shut it down. You can't just stand up and say, now I'm going to shut down the company. So the decision to create an incorporated structure, whether it's an LLP or a private limited company, should come at a time when there is a certain clarity that, yes, I think what I have is, which can be carried forward. The ideation can be converted into a product. The MVP stage can come, and I see a good market for my product where I can take this forward.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to come back to our panelist, Himanshu sir. This is a question for you. And this is also another very specific question. So continuing from where Vidit madam just left, how important would you say is the founders agreement for the overall enterprise and structure and the future growth of the startup?
Yeah. So before answering this question, I just want to add to what previous question Vidyut has answered. I feel that the incorporation of a company, while rightly stating that, should come when the ideation stage has is gone, is being done. The market validation has been done. But from a startup founder perspective, I feel when a founder considers that the serious money has been invested into the product, whether it is in terms of his own time investment or it is in terms of his friends and family's money that he or she has taken, or maybe building up a website itself has taken considerable amount of money in the form of product itself. So when you have some investment done in the idea or the product or the MVP, it is a serious thing for you. It's a time when you should seriously think of incorporating it, be it an LLP or a private limited, is something that depending upon the type of company, the type of startup you're working on. So that's my take on it. So circling back to the question that you mentioned, how important a co-founders agreement is, it is very important. I mean, as I briefly mentioned earlier also, while if you get into an agreement if you start a company without a founders agreement, of course, when you have more than one founders in the company, it is like going ahead without clearly evaluating and mitigating the risk. I have seen numerous cases in front of my eyes where some of the startups got saved because of a clearly defined founders agreement. There was one instance where the relation between two founders failed miserably 3 years down the lane, and it is purely because of the well-crafted founders agreement where the equity of the co-founder was vested for 5 years. The original founder was able to bail out the company. And I have also seen where almost the work got stopped and the startup was about to fail, where amongst the four co-founders, one of the co-founder completely stopped working and picked up another job, and there was no founders agreement in place, and there was no way the equity could have been vested. He walked out with 25% of the shares, and the remaining three were left in lurch. I mean, they could have dropped it, but they continued. So thankfully, they resolved it amicably, but in the absence of a founders agreement. But not everybody is as lucky as they were. So I feel that it is super important. The certain elements I would like to call upon in the co-founders agreement that are very necessary is the terms and condition between the co-founders. As Radhika also mentioned earlier, uh, irrespective of your co-founder's relation with you, whether the co-founder is your husband, wife, spouse, or I mean sibling, or a best of friends. Uh, Irrespective of that, it is very important, because you're not having this co-founders agreement for yourself. It is for the I mean importance of, or for the benefit of the company. And when you're talking about company, you're talking about all the people who are involved in it. It's not just the two founders, it's the employees also. Their fate is also dependent upon the success and failure of the company. And if there is no co-founders agreement in terms of any adversity, I'm sorry, the company is gone. So the terms and conditions, the insurance in case of disagreement between the co-founders. Many people don't understand this, but it is very, very important to have this clause also mentioned. The liability of the co-founders. What are the existing liabilities that the co-founders have? Indemnification in case of any changes in the situation which will impact the startup. Then specifics of all the responsibilities, ownership, and also the initial investments made by each of the founders in the startup. It is very important to lay it down, because some people invest. I mean, I've seen the co-founders. Once somebody says I'm investing money, somebody says I'm investing time, somebody says I'm a tech expert. It is important to lay down their roles and responsibilities clearly. Definition of the business. Then, of course, the background details of the co-founders as well. Of course, about the company, how much capital they have rose so far in terms of from their own pockets or from friends and families. And also, do mention, it is, though it is very early to think about, but details of exit formalities for founders, and the exit clauses. Yeah, because when you are conceptualizing or creating a company, it is very difficult to fathom how am I going to take an exit from the company, right? People say that it is my life, but over a period of time, maybe 4 years, 5 years down the line, people do want to take an exit. They want to do something else. Interest changes, or you have built something big, which is out of your own bounds. Now somebody else has to come in and take it over. So what are the exit formalities that you or exit clause that you want to put in? And likes of that with the dispute resolution. That's very key aspect, that in case of any dispute, what are the arbitration clauses, and pretty much these are the top level, I think, the clauses that need to be
Clauses that
mentioned. Yeah, that I feel that I've seen in the founders agreement. I'm not a lawyer though, but I think Vidyut and Radhika and Pradeep can better mention, in addition to these clauses, if there is anything else that need to be put in. But uh, there has to be a founders agreement. There has to be a co-founders agreement, irrespective of the nature of relation that you guys have, that any co-founders have among each other.
So, so from what I can also add on to this, I mean, another follow-up question. Because generally, startups and everything, they are founded in a spirit of collaboration, cooperation, mutual understanding. Do you think that parties might hesitate at the initial stage, that when they're drawing up the agreements, they have any clauses which might foresee some situations which we're talking about, like exit clauses, disputes? Do you think they might hesitate putting those clauses or considering them so that they don't spoil or affect the present? Anything on that?
Absolutely. So that's the reason why many of the startups fail, because they don't maintain the legal hygiene. But one thing the founders should always understand, that they are working on a particular idea as a hobby, or is it a company serious business that they want to make out of it? If it is a serious business, they have to work on the legal hygiene, and founders agreement is the first and foremost agreement with regards to those critical legal hygiene elements that I think Vidyut and I and Radhika have spoken about as well. So they tend to feel a little shy in terms of talking it out, but take a legal help, hire a lawyer, and let that lawyer talk about all these elements and let them mull about all the answers to these questions. Put it out, put the answers in place, whichever form it may be, but it needs to be tabled out. And I have seen some startups succeeding or avoiding the failure because they had some of the things in place.
Sure. Thank you. So, moving on to Pradeep sir. This question is also very specific, but this is a very domain specific question. So Radhika madam has also mentioned earlier the role of IP, and we are a knowledge economy. A lot of startups are having huge investments in IP assets or prospective investments. So the question is that how can a startup founder protect their intellectual property?
Okay. So normally, if you when you talk about startups, I mean they have a lot of factors to consider initially, like they are involved in branding, target marketing, financial growth, and they don't give much of importance. I mean to the IP. This is a general perception. There are exceptions, I agree, but mostly they are lost in that space, and they focus is more on the product, but they don't give much importance to IP. The moment they realize, I mean, that IP as an asset rather than a compliance, probably the mindset changes there. The thing is like the other aspect which I wanted to talk about here was like when we talk of technology protection, the only scope you have is patents. And when you want to protect your brand, depending on your kind of nature of business, the only scope you have is trademarks, where you can protect yourself rather than, I mean, protect yourself from the big businesses which are always chasing you, right? So, in that
Something we are
context,
finding with Meta at the moment. Facebook
sorry,
changed
come
to
again?
Meta, and something which you're finding right now with Meta, that logo.
Mhm. Yes,
I
yes,
saw a
yes.
couple of these small
Yes, sir.
entities that we have already done this earlier, so on and so forth. But yes, please continue.
True,
Sorry.
true, true, true. So, I mean, this IPA protection actually levels the ground basically, in the sense levels the ground for both the big corporates and the startup players also. Eventually, as Himanshu has pointed in the initial part of this session, about 80% of the startups fail, according to some data point he said. So, eventually, even whether your startup fails or sees a success, your IP is always valued. Your IP is always valued. And I have seen several startups which failed, but the IP has been monetized by some other acquiring companies. Okay. So the moment the thought process changes, I mean, the how they view this IP, I think that's the tipping point where probably the startups would benefit mostly. Uh, that's one point I want to make clear. Anything else
So,
you sorry.
yeah, Pradeep sir, just continuing with this, do you think this, so very correctly stated that IP is often not recognized, and once recognized, not given due importance.
True.
Maybe
True.
once that potential is found, that is when they take seriously a lot of
Yes.
companies. Do you think this is a future only for startups, or it is actually permeating the entire corporate ecosystem?
No, no. I mean, when you talk about traditional sectors, they are very active when it comes to patent protection and IP. They have their in-house IP cells, and they also have their IP policies drafted. Especially in India, I think pharma is very active, like in many,
Pharma
many
is active.
countries.
Yeah.
They've been active since lot of decades, like right. And the other areas are probably automobile sector is where you see a lot of IP actively being pursued. Uh, but when you talk about the other technology and computer science and IT sectors, this is where the law is also evolving, and we are more building a stable ground, more in line with the international community. So I think there are few hiccups and also few problems within the law also which need to be addressed. But it's the point is, this is the only resort they have for now. So I think
That's
the
true.
startup should recognize this, and also I think the big corporates, even in the IT sector, have known this for a long time, and they have set up their in-house teams, and they also
Teams.
actively work with their teams. But the startups environment, the companies which more driven towards the open source coding and stuff. I mean, these startups are like, they don't consider IP to be a asset. They, but the very companies which start from the Silicon Valley or other Silicon Valley, other big startup eco-friendly cities, they are very proactive, and even investors value it very much. I mean, at least from that standpoint of view, when you have your product or your service protected, it gives them confidence to put some money into your company, because at least at a later date they are sure that there is value in there is a what do you call it? There is a market which can be tapped, and there is an exclusivity for a certain time, at least for somebody to catch up. So this gives the confidence to investors also. So that is also something which the startup should consider.
Thank you so much, sir. There was a couple of follow-up questions, but I'll come back to it later if time permits, after some questions to the panelists are done. Yeah, Himanshu.
Yeah. So just wanted to add to what Pradeep said there. I mean, there are two things. One is protecting intellectual property from outside world, and other is protecting intellectual property from within the organization too. So what we have done is we've signed certain elements for which we want to protect the IP. We've also signed an NDA with some specific tech guys in the company, so that when they walk out, they don't walk out with the IP rights that belongs to the organization. So that is something that many startup founders don't evaluate in the beginning. That's A. Second point that I wanted to add was many times startup founders feel that the IP rights can only be secured for technological invention that they have done. Recently, there was a case where somebody, one of my fellow founder from another company, reached out to me that his website has been completely copied, and there were certain elements which were or features that only they were providing on their website. So my first question was, have they taken a copyright of, I mean, the websites that they had built years ago? The answer was absolutely no. Though we are now trying to help him in terms of securing the rights for their own websites too, but it is something that the founders don't understand, that creating an agreement in time and registering their copyrights, whether it is copyrights, patents, or designs or anything like that, in time saves them in the longer run, keeps them completely secure from all these obstacles later. So my 2 cents to what Pradeep just said.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Pradeep, sir, if I have to place this kind of a statement that when you're looking from a startup which is just at inception stage, or they're working on something which might get innovative in the times to come, do they perceive the intellectual property costs for protection, filing, documentation, monitoring, a lot of process becomes? Do they perceive this as an expense which they cannot really afford, which a bigger company like suppose Microsoft or Apple, they can have huge teams dedicated for this?
Yes.
Do you think this inequality also kind of pushes startups against the wall or against the corner when it comes to head on with these
Yeah.
entities?
Yeah, you rightly pointed it out. I think cost is definitely a factor. Okay, so it all depends on how much budget they want to allocate to it, and how much importance they want to give to this particular technology or brand, whatever it is, the IP, specific IP which they are riding on. Uh, Primarily speaking, people from the tech space, if their company is driven by the product and specific technology, then most likely they are willing to invest the money in protecting their rights. At least because there are ways to extend the cost and procedures and other aspects which to probably push the cost to a later date in the patenting process and also in the trademark process also, because they are international treaties, and at a later date going internationally is always expensive, but protecting your rights in India is really not that expensive. uh, so usually it's a yes and no. To answer your question, few companies do recognize the importance of it, depending on the kind of business they are in. At the same time, few companies they don't value it as a asset, but they look it more like a compliance, which probably
Compliance.
somebody would have asked them to fulfill.
Right.
To push from the investors side, or to push on somebody else. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
the cost factor you've touched the right point to discuss is many founders feel that it is really expensive to file for your intellectual property rights. There have been many instances where uh, in order to save money, of course, sometimes they don't do it. I've seen people where they themselves try to file intellectual property rights, IPR online, and later on, a couple of years later, they come back and say that somebody else has used their logo, and possibly they, while they themselves are filing it, they filed it in the wrong class. So lack of knowledge is also another aspect which makes them bleed later. So it's not just the importance of doing it, it's also the importance of doing it right. It does not matter to hire a intellectual property right expert right at the beginning. If it is, I'm sure you can find plenty of intellectual property lawyers in the country, I mean, which are startup friendly too. Use their services to file it at the right time and at the right place. I mean, just to give you an example, for lawyered, recently came up in a situation where somebody had used the word similar to lawyered and created a website. And I don't want to name them, but yes, it was very similar to what our name is, and we have protected our rights. We have our logo registered and everything. So we were, because of that reason, we were able to give them a notice and stop them in doing what they were trying to achieve using our brand name. So the startup founders, while they are doing so many things in terms of the problem statement that they are solving, please, I strongly suggest hire a lawyer or take legal services in the beginning in the right time. It doesn't cost you anything in the beginning.
I think that's a very valuable advice because, as you correctly stated, there are people helping filing online, even online services and everything is done. But I'm sure knowledge and wisdom of lawyers definitely has its place. And as Saraj just now mentioned, please don't ignore this. This is very essential for your protecting your value, particularly things actually become really valuable, and there are infringers out there in the market. So, with this, we have come to the close of individual questions to the panelists. Now, we will have a couple of more questions to the panel in general, and anyone and everyone of the participants here, if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat box. We'll be able to take it up and share with the panelists. So, in the meantime, then I'll continue and I'll read those a bit more generic questions. And at the end, of course, I have my own, what I would say, I have my own interests. I want to get law schools more involved in this process. So I'll also have a couple of queries in that. How can we be more proactive? Not from the startup point of view, but actually promoting entrepreneurship in India. Let me then begin with the question is that what are the roadblocks you think that startup faces while entering industry? And this is common to all the panelists. And anyone can go ahead and take this question.
Can you repeat that question, Victor?
Yeah. So, what are the roadblocks that you think that a startup generally faces at the time of inception or even convenience?
I think because I sort of opened the
Or
floor.
while procuring our investment. Yeah.
So I'll just take a shot at it.
Sure.
I guess, I think it's a culmination of what we've already discussed, in terms of the standard roadblocks. So I think first and foremost, probably, not having the proper legal structure can possibly push you back a little bit. But of course, that, you can bounce back by then creating a legal structure and sort of getting your, compliances in place. Secondly, obviously, your legal health, ensuring that the legal health and, the compliances are in place sometimes can play a large role, in, pushing back potential investors. Third, sometimes is probably overestimating, your market reach. So, this happens, I think, a lot in places like, for instance, Bangalore, where we're called as the Silicon Valley of the East. I mean, this is the tech capital of the country. But having said that, not all technology is innovative or let alone patentable. I mean, patentable is something which is, that is your kick-ass idea. That is something that is going to definitely take you forward. But before that, I think a lot of startups overestimate their capabilities, overestimate what they want to bring out in the market, which, is probably already there and far too much of it. Right? For instance, I'll tell you an example like, food products like vegan products, for instance. Now, in a place like Bangalore, vegan products are available literally everywhere. Now, a startup comes and says that I want to set up an e-commerce shop for vegan products. Now, if that idea is to take off and become the next big thing, are you capable of scaling at the level that, let's say, a big plastic has? That is something that, should be an initial ideation. And I would, when we encourage entrepreneurs, and when we encourage entrepreneurship in engineering colleges or law colleges, I think it's very important to understand that entrepreneurship is not for the faint-hearted at all. Right? This is a very, very long journey. This is a very, very difficult journey. And each one of us, like Radhika can say for herself, I can say for myself, we are legal entrepreneurs where we started off our own firms, at with a lot at risk, and it's a very tough journey. So therefore, I think as much as we encourage entrepreneurship, I think the struggles of an entrepreneur also need to be highlighted, and so that we can avoid this extent of failure. That it's not all fun. It's not like you're going to become the next Elon Musk. I mean, I've seen how many entrepreneurs having their gurus as Elon Musk. Now, to have a guru like Elon Musk, you should have even 1% of Elon Musk within you, right? So it's all, amazing to say the word entrepreneur, but what does it really mean? I think that is what probably our schools can actually explain. That entrepreneurship is not just, a buzzword. This is a very big responsibility. And embark on that journey only if you believe that you're capable of taking it, to see it till the very end. So that is very, of course, my perspective over here because, firms like mine, we have so many people working and explain to you that they have got the next big thing going. And when you sort of listen to them, you're like, okay, this doesn't sound like the next big thing, but these guys really want to, sort of go out there and, with all that juice and juice. But who's going to tell them that we don't believe this is the next big thing? And they're setting themselves up for failure. And that's where the 80% that Himanshu mentioned comes, right? So I think a little bit of, entrepreneurship needs to be explained with all its benefits as well as its pitfalls, and that needs to happen from the school level itself. And that would be something that I would really like.
As an entrepreneur, every one of you have done this. I have a personal question, and that is, what was the trigger? because it's like a leap in a direction. There's a risk. You could have other directions of your legal careers. Very successful, maybe more faster. You could reach certain positions. But there is a certain decision you took that I want to take it this way. So what triggered it? I mean, you must have felt your own set of fear, uncertainty, risks. But despite that, you took that. So I just want to know. It's a very personal question. It will definitely be different for every people. But what was the trigger? What really made you do that?
See, for me personally, I think of the lot, I think legal as a profession has lesser risks involved. If you ask me, we're a service-oriented industry, right? So the initial capital investment is not very large. You can start your law office from your extra room also, and you can take your meetings in, let's say a co-working space, or you can take it in a Starbucks, at least in a place like Bangalore, right? So when the initial capital investment is not that high, I think that obviously plays a very large role. One, two, I think experience. In the field of law, even today, experience matters. And when you believe that you are in a position to sort of advise across the board, so the decision also to become an entrepreneur comes at that point. And third, for me, it was work-life balance. I was done working with a big law firm, having jobs, and I wanted to do that for myself. I was planning a family, and I wanted to continue to work. It was not the end of the road for me, but the beginning of one. So therefore, and we at KLA are exactly that, right? We encourage a work-life balance, and truly in the sense. I mean, I just not just to say work-life balance, but send an email at 1 o'clock and expect a response at 4 p.m. Not like that. So I think personally for me, this was my objective, and it has been well achieved. I can say that.
Glad Vijit said like work-life balance is sorted now. I mean, that's something which I never hear from anybody venturing into startups. That's other way around usually. Okay, because I mean, when you're working under someone for a company, I think at least you have some time, some work-life balance as compared to being an entrepreneur. I think that's I mean, her experience. I'm glad that she has it, but I think it's the other way around for most of the people out there. It's like
I think
they.
Pradeep, it's probably because I can say no to whom I want to say no to.
And
Yeah,
and
Probably
and
that
in
comes to
and in
that.
addition to this, Pradeep, it's the passion that drives. I mean, if even if I am asked to do something at 5 p.m. in the evening, and it is not something I'm liking, it is being enforced by my boss, I will I will not like it. But if it is out of passion, out of my own startup, even 1 a.m. is no problem.
So I would just like to add to what Vidyut also shared that so I worked with firms for about 8 years, and then I decided to go on my own. So I've been practicing for 15 years now, and one is yes, the passion. The second was being so I'm a first generation lawyer, and being with law firms, there was a certain defined kind of work that you could do, and I couldn't do that anymore. I was very clear that there is so much in the legal fraternity, there's so much scope to learn. And that is what drove me. And every year, so I've been practicing for 7 years, each year I learn one new thing that I go into. So I'm no longer restricted to just one type of law. I keep learning on the go, keep educating myself, keep educating my team. If the team wants to start some new aspect of law, which we've not been doing, I tell them to take it up. I encourage that. So I think that's the freedom to just venture into the kind of work that you want to do. That's what really drove me as well.
So I think this freedom and the sense of personal involvement and personal aspects, the growth, I think this is one of the driving forces. Another thing which I came across is this 80-20 ratio, which is being that 80% fail and 20% succeed. So can we state that the 20% that succeeded is because the 80% that gave the lessons for the 20% to move on? I mean, if you're spreading it out across a certain period, the 20 who are right now in their 20 successful, maybe in the past, they were part of that 80, Some of their initiatives failed, the risks they took, some stopped, and some just went ahead probably and came up and improvised their services or products. And that is the reason this continuance and perseverance in a certain field, in a certain area. Do you think this is also one of the criteria which can really make or break it?
Of course, aptly said. So it is this is a game of last man standing. I mean, two people working on a similar idea, maybe solving the similar problem in a similar market space or domains. It is the perseverance and diligence of the startup founder, how passionately he or she can pick up the idea and work on it, and how soon he or she can pivot based upon market feedback and market response, decides who is in that 80% and who is in that 20%. So you summed up rightly. Of course, it is the diligence with which the founders work can decide on which side of the 80-20, as the Pareto principle is also applies. It largely applies
Yeah,
here also.
that's right. That's right. So we have a couple of questions in the Pareto principle. I think yes, two as so one of them has said, okay, this is a very topic which is right now a lot of discussion. NFTs, non-fungible tokens. The question is, if I convert my property payments to NFT, is that legally offensive? So that would be, I think, one scope of discussion, but maybe we can revert to this separately because we would like to have our questions maybe about the startups and stuff. There's another question. Sorry. Does NDA mention one cannot copy the nature of startup? If yes, how is that feasible in the present startup culture where you come across a new idea every Does any panelist want to address this?
Yeah, I could go in. So see, when you say concept of the startup or the nature of the startup, so they won't see in an NDA what happens, if I just quickly share, is that it's your confidential information or your trade secret that you're trying to safeguard, right? Which will give you a competitive advantage as compared to your competitors. So the NDA will clearly define that what is the confidential information, and the employees, if you're talking about an employee or another co-founder, that they cannot, so you can't stop anybody from copying an idea, right? Unless it is something which is patentable, which Pradeep will also be able to throw light on. So an idea or a concept per se cannot be, nobody can claim exclusive rights over it or monopolize it. It can only be done if the idea is such that it is patentable or it's protected by some other IP, but the only IP that can protect an idea as such is the patent. So if the idea that they're talking about is not protected under an patent, they cannot stop, because that amounts to non-compete. Okay, because then you're stopping, and it goes also against the Contract Act, which clearly says that you cannot take away the freedom of people to trade in a certain area and even your fundamental rights. So the NDA will just say that you cannot disclose the confidential information, or maybe indulge in something where you're using the confidential information of the company in the other entity that you're going to or you're starting off. So that is what I can say, that they cannot stop a similar business, but you should not be using the confidential information of the other entity in the new business that is being started. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the clarification and for the answer. As we are coming to the closing time, any of our participants having any queries, please share it with the hosts here. Bitan is there, and Bitan's team is there, so they'll definitely put it across to the panelists, and our panelists would love to answer to them. Maybe we'll get back to you by email. So before we close, I would like to pose one final query to all our panelists here. As law schools, how do we promote legal entrepreneurships? This is something really we are looking forward to, but our traditional career to be honest, we all traditionally counsel them, you become in litigation, journal law firm, become well, maybe because this risk factor is also a big of a question. But what Vidut Madam also pointed out, that law is one of the good areas where we can still try out because of some of its advantages. So as law schools, we are really aggressively thinking of inculcating entrepreneurship. They being their own masters, and as you said, the involvement. So this is something I would really look forward to your inputs, and maybe also after this session is over, I would also like to reach out to you from the law school's point of view and take your individual inputs, see how we can get this entrepreneurship working for us. But for us and for our students here, how would you suggest that we take this? This is kind of an uncharted territory for us also. There's a lot of aspects we do not know. So where will you be looking forward to some advice?
See, having closely worked with a lot of startups, I would strongly recommend that don't limit the e-cells that you have in your university or college to only the legal entrepreneurship. You never know. A law student might come up with a brilliant idea on e-commerce, and having a legal knowledge helps him nurture that idea and bring it on. So, do not restrict it to the just legal domain. Let them figure out the various ideas that they want to work on. B, get them exposure as much as possible by tying up with the right incubators and accelerators in the country, because in every that you may do within the limitation of your e-cells, the exposures that they will get by connecting with other startups at different stages is going to enhance their learning, which I feel that learn by experience of yourself is one aspect, but where you learn more when you learn by experience of others. So give them exposure by inducting them into different incubator programs. I can help you in connecting that, in doing that also. So these are two things that I feel colleges can do best for inculcating the entrepreneurship in their college.
So I think I like to add just one point here. Instead of just encouraging internships with lawyers and law firms and litigation offices, let them intern with corporates, right? And corporates don't necessarily mean just